tal? ¿Cómo están? Estamos en un webinario de la Asociación Mexicana en Ultrasonografía Crítica y Urgencias. Buenos días a todos desde México, específicamente desde la ciudad de Monterrey y también desde Guadalajara, Jalisco, con nuestro profesor que les voy a presentar en un momento. Sean ustedes bienvenidos a este webinario. En esta ocasión tenemos un invitado pues increíble, un invitado muy especial, al cual le agradecemos mucho el haber aceptado nuestra invitación. El tema que vamos a tocar en esta ocasión es acerca de la posición prono en pacientes con SIRA grave, como lo vamos a ver. Tenemos a un experto mundial en este tema, al doctor Claude Guérin, desde la ciudad de Lyon, en Francia. Y pues bueno, antes de presentarles a nuestro invitado, les voy a presentar al doctor Quetzalcóatl Chávez, quien nos está acompañando desde la ciudad de Guadalajara. Él es miembro, él es parte de nuestra asociación, él es profesor reconocido de nuestro grupo, al cual también le agradezco mucho tu presencia, Quetzal. ¿Cómo estás? Buenos días.
Bien, Juan, muchísimas gracias y buenos días a todo México y toda Latinoamérica. Una vez más, en un excelente webinario, fuera tal vez del tópico específico de la ultrasonografía usada en los servicios de urgencias o escenarios críticos, sin embargo, un tema de suma relevancia, particularmente para nuestro país. Desde 2009 nos vimos invadidos de una epidemia importante que llevó a muchísimos pacientes a insuficiencia respiratoria severa. Para 2013, el mismísimo doctor Guérin, que es el invitado del día de hoy, publica uno de los ensayos pues probablemente más trascendentales y con un número necesario a tratar sumamente bajo de pacientes con hipoxemia severa. Y bueno, pues qué mejor que él que nos platique, ¿no?, qué es lo que ha venido desde 2013 hasta la fecha en estos pacientes y qué más hay, además de la posición prona, o qué debemos esperar de la posición prona, pues en las siguientes décadas. Muchas gracias por conseguir, pues una vez más, Juan, te vuelas la barda, ¿no?, consiguiendo esta vez al doctor Claude Guérin. Y bueno, pues a darle.
Así es, Quetzal, muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Y efectivamente, el doctor Claude Guérin es uno de los principales promotores y autores de los grandes ensayos que recientemente se hicieron, sobre todo con resultados positivos, con resultados trascendentes para esta estrategia y esta modalidad. Que por cierto, también les mandamos un saludo a todos los profesores y alumnos que están en este momento en el curso de ventilación mecánica avanzada en la ciudad de Querétaro. También les mandamos un saludo a toda la gente que se ha interesado cada vez más en estos temas, y desde luego a toda nuestra comunidad que nos acompaña en diferentes países, desde luego en México, pero nos acompaña gente desde Perú, desde Ecuador. Ahí tenemos mucha gente de Bolivia que también nos hace el favor de acompañarnos, en Argentina, en Uruguay, en Brasil, en Paraguay, etcétera. Les damos la bienvenida y les agradecemos mucho el estar con nosotros. Esperemos disfruten junto con Quetzalcóatl y yo de una excelente ponencia y de un extraordinario momento académico con uno de los líderes a nivel mundial del tema del prone position y en general de la ventilación mecánica y del SIRA. Así que demos la bienvenida al doctor Claude Guérin. Thank you so much, Dr. Claude, for accepting our invitation. Really, really happy for having you. Let's get started with your conference. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Claude.
Thank you so much, Juan. I'm very happy to be here. It's an honor for me to share with you some data about the prone positioning in ARDS patients. So I divided my talk into 3 parts. The first is about the rationale, and we are going to talk about some physiology. And then we are going to move to clinical field with the clinical effects on patient outcome, and to conclude with the clinical use, in particular, how are we using prone positioning in daily life. And we are going to look at some recent data we have, and also to conclude with the use of positive and expiratory pressure, PEEP, in prone positions that could be still an issue which is not really solved. So let's start with the rationale. And as I told you, we are going to talk about some physiological findings. And the first rationale for using prone in ARDS patient is an improvement in oxygenation. That was the first reason for trying initially a session of prone positioning in ARDS patients with severe hypoxemia, because it has been shown from the very onset that this simple maneuver was able to improve the oxygenation, sometimes dramatically. And here you have a quite old study from Gattinoni's group. The interest of this study is that they were using a continuous measurement of arterial blood gases. There was a fiber inserted into the arterial or femoral artery, collecting continuously the PaO2 and also PCO2. And you see that in this patient under an FiO2 of 1, the PaO2 under FiO2 ratio, because we are with an FiO2 of 1, jump dramatically once the patients move from supine to the prone positioning. You see this immediate and dramatic increase by a factor of 2 that was maintained over time during the prone position session. And when the patient went back to the supine position, you see that oxygenation, of course, worsened, but PO2 was higher than it was before the procedure. And in the same study, they were also able to find out the mechanism by which oxygenation improved in ARDS patients from the prone. And the improvement of oxygenation resulted from a reduction in intrapulmonary shunt. And they measure the shunt by using a very sophisticated technique, which is a MIGET, the multiple inert gas emission technique. And you see that here you have the amount of shunt in the supine position, 44%. And with this technique, this percentage represents the amount of cardiac output that is going to flow through a non-ventilated lung areas with VA over Q ratio equal to 0. And you see that this proportion of cardiac output went down significantly during the proning at 30 minutes and 2 hours. And after the patient went back to the supine position, there is again an increase in the shunt, but again, like we have seen with the PO2, the shunt remained below it was before the procedure. And for the intrapulmonary shunt to go down, there are two possibilities based on the distribution of ventilation relative to the perfusion. The first possibility is you have more perfusion in well-ventilated areas. And indeed, in this study, what they found that in the prone position, the amount of the cardiac output that was flowing through the real shunted regions with VAQ equal to 0 decreased significantly, but you had also more flow of more blood flowing through lung regions with low VAQ, but not that low, you know, between 0.1 to 10, and this amount of flow increased. So you have two mechanisms. The first is less flow into the non-ventilated regions and more flow in well-ventilated regions. However, there is a point which is not so clear. You know, if you look at these graphs, that may be somehow complicated, so I would like to take some time about it. You have here the regional perfusion in prone versus the regional perfusion in supine position. So in the supine position, you have more flow in the dorsal lung regions, you know, due to the gravity. And what is expected when you prone the patient, if the distribution of blood flow throughout the lung was only due to the gravity, you will expect to have more flow flowing through the ventral lung regions. But actually, what was observed in many investigations done in animals, in humans, it is really the opposite that was expected. I mean, there is still the majority of blood flow that was prevalent in the dorsal lung regions while the patient was prone. So the gravity plays a minor role in the distribution of blood flow throughout the lung, something like 13 to 20%. So there is another possibility to explain the reduction in intrapulmonary shunt due to the prone positioning. It is more ventilation in well-perfused area. And we have seen that in prone position, the well-perfused area are still in the dorsal part of the lung when the patient is in prone position. And Luciano Gattinoni made a very important study many years ago. It was not only one of the first studies using CT scan in ARDS patients in supine position, but also in prone position. Indeed, you have here patients, 11 patients with acute respiratory failure, investigated into the CT scan in terms of gas over tissue ratio. The higher this ratio, the higher the gas as compared to the tissue, or if you will, the, the less tissue as compared to the gas. And you see that in supine position, there is a progressive decrease in this ratio if you move from the anterior to the posterior lung regions, meaning that from the anterior, the sternal part of the lung, to the spine parts of the lung, there is less and less gas and more and more tissue. And if you move the patient to the prone position, you see that you have a reversion of this ratio in the posterior part of the lung. The spine parts of the lung have a ratio that is going to go up, meaning that you have more gas or less tissue. But this is offset by a reduction of this ratio in the sternal part of the lung, meaning that in those regions you have less gas and more tissue. But you see that at the very end, what is very remarkable is that you have an homogenization of this gas over tissue ratio throughout the lung. And this term, this finding, homogenization, is a key factor, is a keyword in the world of prone positioning ARDS patients. And I would like to emphasize on this by showing just this slide coming from an experimental study in sheep whose lungs were injured by, by a surfactant depletion. And they use a very sophisticated lung imaging technique, which is the positron emission tomography. And with this technique, you are able to measure regionally in a quantitative way the gas fraction, the aeration, the ventilation, the perfusion, and the shunt. And if you look here at what happens in the most dorsal part of the lung, in the most bottom lung, you see that you have here an important loss of aeration of the lung. You can easily see that with a color code. If it is in yellow, it is well aerated. If it is in black, it is non-aerated. And at the same time here, I have no time to go further in detail about this technique, but with this technique, you can here measure, estimate the intrapulmonary shunt. You have a major shunt in those regions which are not aerated, just because the flow continues to be there in the dorsal part of the lung due to the gravity. And if you flip the patient, the sheep, the prone position, you see that the marked homogenization of every physiological parameter. You have an homogenization in the aeration, in the shunt, in the ventilation, and in the perfusion, not only in these dorsal lung regions, which are here, but overall throughout the lung. So homogenization is really a key point, a key word, if you look at the pathophysiology of prone positioning, and we have this homogenization to explain the improvement of oxygenation, and we will see that again when we are looking at the ventilator-induced lung injury prevention. So there is some, a basic, a simple scenario in which if you have a lung recruitment, a lung aeration in the dorsal or spinal part of the lung, which is greater than the loss of lung volume in the ventral part, associated with the continuous prevalent lung perfusion towards the spinal lung region in the prone, this scenario favors the increase in ventilation towards the well-perfused areas, and therefore you have a dramatic reduction in intrapulmonary shunt and an improvement in oxygenation. So that closes the point I would like to make about the oxygenation with prone. Now, there is a second rationale, which is now, as you know very well, very much important than oxygenation, which is the lung protection from the ventilator-induced lung injury, which is due to overdistension, atelic trauma, biotrauma. Here it is again, an old experimental study in dogs. The dogs were injured by hypervolemia. And in this case, hypervolemia did not induce a hydrostatic pulmonary edema, but it was associated with a marked increase in intra-abdominal pressure that compressed the lung and resulted in acute lung injury. And there were a normal part and a hypovolemia part in this experiment. Here the animals are in supine position and they're in prone position. And what is shown here is a pleural pressure. And the pleural pressure in this experiment was measured directly by wafer, by sensor, which were inserted directly into the pleural space of the animals, both in the anterior part and in the posterior part of the thorax. And you can very easily see from this data that with the prone position, you have a dramatic homogenization and reduction of the gradient of pleural pressure across the lung. So again, there is an homogenization. And if you think about homogenization of pleural pressure across this anterior to posterior gradient, you have actually a homogenization in the transpulmonary pressure. So in this study with the prone positioning, you homogenize and you reduce also the transpulmonary pressure gradient, and transpulmonary pressure means lung stress. So you minimize and you homogenize the lung stress through the lung by proning the animal in this case. And lung protection has been demonstrated recently directly in humans with ERDS by using the lung CT scan. So you may be interested in CT scan because your group is focused on lung imaging technique, and this study coming from Greece was very nice. It was done in patients used as their own control. That may be a limit because you cannot make sure that there is some remnant effect of the supine position and the prone position. But nevertheless, the results were very straightforward. You have here the subdivision of the lung volume by using the CT scan, the CT densities. You have here the non-aerated areas in black. In dark gray, you have the poorly aerated lung areas. In clear gray, you have here the well-aerated lung. And in white, you have here the hyperinflated area. That is in supine position. And the same patient was moved to prone position. And you see the change in the subdivision of the lung volume. You have more and more well-ventilated lung areas, resulting to the reduction in non-aerated and poorly aerated lung area. So there is an increase in well aeration due to a recruitment phenomenon. And you have also, in the same time, a reduction in hyperinflation. So you have two major benefits of using prone. So the settings being, the ventilator settings being the same. You have on one hand reduction in hyperinflation, and on the other hand a lung recruitment and overall recruitment. And it could be interesting to look at what is really the motor of this finding. One of the motor when you prone the patient is you are going to change the anatomy and the physiology of the chest wall. And just an extra comment, I was interested to read this paper in Nature Communication, which was a CT scan reconstruction of the thorax of the Neanderthal people, many years ago. And here you have a CT scan reconstruction of the thorax of Homo sapiens, our thorax. And you see the big difference between the thorax in both directions, in both dimensions, in the lateral and in the anterior to posterior. And in this paper, they were thinking about the fact that this conformation of thorax between these two people, between these two spaces, was an argument for a stronger diaphragm. People with a bigger thorax might have a bigger diaphragm, so they were stronger to breathe, and this was a weapon to face, the dangers of life in those times. But what was the link between these two people? You know, we don't know. But you see, when you put a patient from, sorry, it's in France, it's here's the supine position. You have here the spine there, the heart is here in supine, and then you move to the prone position. And you have here the spine is here. Sorry, the spine is here. You know, it's really in the supine. The spine, it's really in prone. The spine is in the same position in the heart also, but really I can tell you that people was moved to the prone position, and you see clearly that there is a modification of the shape of the thorax, and therefore the lung has to adapt, you know, has to fit inside this change in conformation of the chest wall. So it could be that the chest wall is a motor of the findings of the change that occurs into the lung. And we were interested in that with my colleagues. And what we did in a series of 24 ALS patients investigated at the same PEEP in supine position at 30 degrees inclination from the horizontal position. We tested, you know, two inclinations, 30 and 0 in supine, and then we moved the patients to prone, and we tested two other inclinations, 0 and 15 degrees in prone. And what we were interested in respiratory mechanics, and we measured the esophageal and the gastric pressure and the elastin and so on. And what we saw, what we found really is that there is a reduction actually in the elastance of the chest wall in supine position between 30 and 0 degrees inclination. And if you move the patient to the prone, you have indeed an increase in the chest wall elastance. You know, this is well known. It has been reported many times, but you see that there is really an increase in chest wall elastance in prone as compared to supine, only if you compare 0 inclination in supine versus 0 inclination in prone or 15. But if you compare 30-degree inclination in supine versus 0 degrees in prone, you have no change in elastance. So the inclination plays a role, and you know, this change in static elastance of the chest wall was not related to a change in gastric pressure, because you see that the gastric and expiratory pressure was similar at 2 inclination, but actually it increased dramatically by 6 centimeters of water in prone position. And this increase may explain here's the reduction, the increase in elastance of the chest wall in the prone position. So it could be, you know, that the chest wall configuration may be an important finding to explain the lung effect of prone position. And you know that there are many differences between the thorax conformation across the persons. And the third rationale I would like to discuss with you before moving to the clinical effects is the hemodynamic effect. And this is, you know, this is something which is not very well known, and it is a recent, you know, there are recent findings about that. We know for sure for many years that in prone positioning, the hemodynamics is at least stabilized and sometimes even improved. And Jean-Louis Teboul in Paris, France, made this very interesting study with the following hypothesis. You know, the hypothesis is shown here. With a prone position, you have an increase in intra-abdominal pressure. I showed you that in the previous slide, which is going to increase the systematic venous return, which increase the right ventricle preload. This is a factor that is going to increase the left ventricle preload. But you see that prone position also reduces hypoxemia, promotes lung recruitment, and both reduce the pulmonary vascular resistance and then decrease the right ventricular afterload. And if you have an increase in the central blood volume, you also recruit actually lung capillaries and you reduce pulmonary vascular resistance. So you have a right ventricle that operates in very good condition in prone with an increase in preload and a reduction in afterload. and that is going to improve the left ventricle preload. But depending on the reserve of the preload, you may have or you may haven't an increase in cardiac output. And indeed, the investigators with this scheme in mind, 18 ARDS patients, and they tested the preload dependence of the cardiac output in the supine position by using the passive lung rising test. And 9 patients were preload dependent in supine and 9 were not. And when the patients were moved to the prone position, those patients who were preload dependent in supine increased cardiac output in prone, and the 9 patients who were not preload dependent in supine did not increase the cardiac output in prone position. And in a recent study also we have done in Lyon, we have seen that over a very large number of prone position sessions, there is a slight but a significant increase in cardiac output on average by using the prone position. So, you know, it could be, hemodynamic deterioration is not an argument for not using prone in ARDS patients. So I would like to move to the second part of the talk, which is dedicated to the clinical effects. So we enter into the field of the evidence-based medicine. And first, I summarize on this table the first 4 large trials comparing a prone position group and a supine position group in ARDS patients. You know, you have the first Italian trial, our first trial in France. It's not really ARDS patients. We investigated all comers hypoxemic acute respiratory failure patients, but 30% at ERDS, I mean PF ratio less than 200 millimeters of mercury, but an additional 25% of the patient had a PF ratio between 200 and 300. So on the average, we had 50% in each group of patients with ARDS according to the current Berlin definition. You have here the Spanish trial for Jordi Mancebo, and here's the second Italian trial. And you see, you have for each of these trials, the number of patients in each group, supine and prone, the PF ratio at the time of randomization, and the mortality in each group, the mortality in supine, the mortality in prone group. And even though there was a marked reduction in mortality in the Spanish trial, the difference was not significant, probably due to a lack of power. And no one of these trials was positive in terms of survival. However, these 4 trials were meta-analyzed at the individual patient level. That is, we put together our database into a single one, patient by patient, and getting an image, made the analysis, and you have here the results. So you have no difference between the 2 groups regarding the overall population, no difference in patients with a PF ratio greater than 100 millimeters of mercury. But if you look at the subgroup of patients with a PF ratio less than 100 millimeters of mercury, you have a significant increase in survival favoring the use of prone positions. That was the first, you know, the first positive signal from the evidence-based medicine favoring the use of prone position in ARDS patients. And at the same time, we had continued to work, and we designed and we performed and published a specific trial, the ProSiva trial in specific patients. We included ARDS patients according to the previous definition with severity criteria. We define it as a PF ratio less than 150 millimeters of mercury, with a PEEP of at least 5 and an FeO2 of at least 60%. And furthermore, I didn't mention this on this slide, but it's very important. Furthermore, this criterion should be present 12 to 24 hours after the diagnosis of ERDS. And we used, on average, 4 sessions of proning per patient in the prone position group. And on average, each session lasted 17 consecutive hours. And you see that the time spent in prone represented, 75% of the time allocated to the prone position, depending on the group of patients. And what we obtained was a significant reduction in mortality, favoring the use of prone. You see on this number of patients, it's interesting to see that the number of patients in each group was exactly the same as the one in the individual meta-analysis of Luciano Gattinoni. And what we also found interesting was that the beneficial effect of prone position was present whatever the level of PF ratio at the time of randomization. You have here the mortality at day 90, according to 4 quartiles, and here you have the supine position group, the prone position group is here, and from the from this quartile to this most severe one, each time the prone position was beneficial. In particular, you see the biggest difference between the two groups was in this quartile between 105 to 124 millimeter of mercury PF ratio. And you see that we really enrolled very severely hypoxemic patients between in this first quartile. The PF ratio at the time of randomizations was in the range 45 to 87 millimeter of mercury. So now, from this evidence-based medicine data, we have some good evidence for using prone position in patients with severe hypoxemia. There is a discussion about the threshold 100, 150. How now? Let's move on some findings about the clinical use in the daily practice. How do we use prone position in the daily practice? On this slide, you have 2 different kinds of study, randomized control trials and observational studies. Here you have, I summarize for you the use of prone position. Here you have the rate of use of prone position in some relevant randomized control trials. You have the OSCILLATE trials, the Canadian trial on HFO ventilation, the LOVES trial, the Canadian trial regarding the comparing high versus low PEEP. You see that in Canada, they don't like very much prone position. It was used in less than 5% of the patients. In France, you have here the EXPRESS trial, comparing higher to lower PEEP, 15% of use of prone position. In the ART trial, this trial done by Marcello Amato, comparing a maximum recruitment strategy to a conventional PEEP, you see that the rate of use of prone was only 15 centimeters of water. The OSCAR trial, which is a UCAL trial about HFO ventilation, 15% of use. In the ACURASYS trial done by Laurent Papazan in France, we have almost 30% use of a prone position in this trial. In the CESAR trial, the use of ECMO in ERDS patients, the rate increased. It is totally logical to 40%. And in the most recent trial, EOLIA done by Alain Combe in France and in other countries, the rate of use was very high, was very much higher, 60%, but it was not 100%. The rate we would have expected according to the severity of those patients enrolled in this trial. So it is the data regarding the RCT, but if you look at the observational studies, the rates are very much lower. You have the study by Andres Esteban, in particular done in the Spanish world, and you see that the rate of use was very low. In the LungSafe trial, the largest study done ever in the field of ERDS in the current time, more than 2,000 ERDS patients studies, the rate of use of prone was on average 7%. It's a very nice study, the Dohan study done in the US some months ago. You see the rate of use of prone was 10% for all ERDS patients, but it increased with the severity of ERDS, of the hypoxemia, up to 22%. It is here a study we did, a prospective study we did, and I would like to show you some further results in the next slide. The overall use of prone position was 13%, but it was 32% in the severe ARDS, which is interesting, which is, you know, higher rates than the one obtained with the lung-safe study. So in this study, in this APRONET study, it was a prospective prevalence study during a one-day prevalence study repeated 4 times between 2016 and 2017 to 2018. Sorry. So we did 4 days of one-day prevalence study, and we collected more than 700 ARDS patients, of whom 101 were in the prone position, received prone position during the days of the study. And you have here the reasons for not proning. And the first reason for not proning ARDS patients in this international study was that hypoxemia was not severe enough from the clinician. It is interesting. And you know, I will show you on the next slide. I think I did not prepare a slide about that. But you know, actually, the clinician followed the recommendation of the expert. At this time, you know, even so, we had published ProSEVA studies. You know, the clinician followed the recommendation to use a prone position below 100 millimeter of mercury PF ratio. And indeed, the threshold to use prone, the reason for which they consider that its patients were not sufficiently hypoxemic was 130. And the second reason, you know, you have here another reasons on the ARDS classified according to the severity. Of course, in the most severe ARDS patients, the not hypoxemic reason was not prevalent, of course, because in addition, those ARDS patients with severe hypoxemia had other reasons for not being prone. In particular, they had this problem of mean arterial pressure, and you see that it might be that it is not a good reason for not proning. End of life reason is certainly a good reason. The patient will no longer survive according to the clinician's meaning. And also there is another reason for not proning severe ARDS patients. This is interesting because this reason corresponds to abdominal problem not solved. You know, there is still a medical or abdominal problem, and you know, this issue is still not really solved. Even so, we have data for a safety use of prone position in patients with intra-abdominal problem. If we compare the supine to the prone position patient in our study, you have here the patient not prone, the patient prone. There is nothing very, very remarkable. In particular, we confirm that patient in prone received a higher PEEP. The plateau pressure was higher. The tidal volume was low. It is a good, you know, it is a good news. And the PF ratio was very much lower in patients who were going to receive prone than in those who are not. And interestingly, in this study, you know, 91% of the patient had a plateau pressure measure versus 40%, you know, in the lung-safe study. Here you have a summary of the physiological effect of the prone session. So patient has a long prone position session during this study, 18 consecutive hours, and we confirm that prone position for this long duration improve oxygenation, allowing a reduction in oxygenation, no change in PEEP, even though it's statistically significant, there is no really clinical change. There is a reduction in plateau pressure and a reduction in driving pressure, indicating a reduction in improvement in the compliance of the respiratory system. And also interesting was the rate of complications. the rate of complication reported by the clinician was very low. Only 12 different patients had at least one complication, and most of these complications were not that much severe, you know, that were essentially pressure sores. So it could be, there is two explanations for this finding. Either the clinician underreported complications, the true rate of a complication was underestimated, or there is really a very low rate of complication in the present time. And this is a very important information because, you know, with a prone, you improve the oxygenation, you protect the lung, you can improve survival, safety, without any complication for the patient. So the last point I would like to discuss with you regarding the clinical use is how to set the PEEP in prone position. I don't know if it is really a relevant, a very important issue, but you know, it is an issue for the clinician in the daily life. And I would like to go over some study done in the field. And I would like to start with probably the first studies that was done about in humans with ERDS, comparing position and PEEP about oxygenation. It was a study done by Marc Guénier and Laurent Papazian in Marseille, France. They investigated a series of ERDS patients ventilated with a low tidal volume. And you have here, what they did, they used PEEP of 0 at this time. It was in 2004. We were allowed to use PEEP of 0 in ERDS patients, something we can't do in 2019. And also PEEP of 5, 10, and 15 in supine position, in the prone position. Here you have the PF ratio, and here you have the shunt, not measured with the Miget technique, but they use the Swan-Ganz catheter, and they measure actually the venous admixture. I draw here a red line at 150 millimeter of mercury, you know, this magic number. And you see that in the prone position, on average, even on ZIP, the patients were above, you know, were above this threshold. And that means, and with a further increase in PEEP, there is a further improvement in oxygenation. But you know, the two curves in prone and supine along the PEEP were parallel, meaning that there is an additive effect of prone and PEEP, and there is no synergistic effect of PEEP. Prone plus PEEP equal 2, prone plus PEEP does not equal to 3, in other words. And interestingly, in this study, they found some difference between the morphological status of ERDS. If you look here at the PF ratio in supine and in prone, you see that the PEEP effect was more marked in supine, but also in prone, in the diffuse lung infiltrates as compared to the localized infiltrate. But again, you see that even in this kind of ERDS patients, as soon as the patient is in prone, even on ZIP, the PF ratio on average is greater than 150 millimeter of mercury. And another study done in Paris, France by Antoine Bière-Baron was very interesting. Again, we used a very low level of PEEP, 6 centimeters of water, in supine and in prone. And look at different findings. First, look at the PF ratio. On ZIP, again, it is a quite old study. In 2005, we were allowed to use ZIP in ARDS patients. We have an increase in 25% of PF ratio from 64 to 80 millimeter of mercury. And if you look now at what happens, if you compare ZIP, supine, and PEEP, you see that you double the increase. From 25%, you move up to 50% increase in PF ratio just by proning the patient on ZIP. And if you now apply the same low level of PEEP in supine and in prone, you see that you have 71%, and there is really an additive effect. not a synergistic effect of a prone position at low PEEP in ARDS patient. Another interesting finding, so additive effect of oxygenation on the association of prone and low PEEP. So my message here is that the prone position allows you to use lower PEEP, sparse. You can spare some PEEP, and by doing this, you may minimize the hemodynamic effect of higher PEEP. And if you look at another finding in this study, is this slow compartment. They were able to demonstrate that there is two compartments, and in particular, a compartment with a very long time constant as compared to the average behavior of the lung. And you see that if you prone, when you prone the patient, you see that you minimize the amount of lung which is with this long time constant. That means that with the prone position at PEEP of 5, you are able to put back into the ventilation the compartment with a long time constant. And therefore, by this way, you recruit some part of the lung. But another mechanism of the one due to the PEEP, but also that contributes to homogenization, because you have no longer this compartment with a low time constant. So you have another kind of recruitment and a factor that is going to homogenize further the lung. Another very interesting study regarding the use of PEEP and prone was done by this study by Kakar in Turkey in pigs injured by oleic acid. In this study, they performed a recruitment maneuver, and then they tested two levels of PEEP, 15 and 8, in two positions, supine and prone. Randomized, the order was randomized. So you have here the pigs were receiving prone, then supine, and here supine, then prone. And here you have the prone part of this group, the supine part of this group, and so on. And what they did also, they used a continuous measurement of arterial blood gas. And you see that the message of this study is shown here. If you prone the patient after the recruitment maneuver, you see that the oxygenation is maintained with a prone position at a PEEP of 8 centimeters of water, meaning that the prone act in this study like a 7 centimeters of water PEEP based on oxygenation. However, in humans, we have some discrepant findings. Here, it is a very nice study done in Chile by Cornejo and co-workers by using CT scan, and they look at the lung subdivision, like we have seen previously in the study from Greece, and also they look at the atelectroma, the change in aeration during the breathing cycle. And you see that they confirm the homogenization impact of prone position on the lung subdivision. You have a recruitment and less over a distension. And this was observed in recruiters and in non-recruiters, and whatever you use a low or high PEEP. So they basically confirm the study by Gayasu and co-workers. So we have two studies in humans using the CT scan, the gold standard for measuring, for measuring aeration, showing that prone position, whatever you have as settings, whatever you use as PEEP, homogenize the lung. But however, regarding the atelectroma, something we have to minimize. We have to minimize the amount of lung which is aerated during insufflation and de-aerated during the subsequent exsufflation. Atelectroma is minimized with the prone, but only in those patients who had a high potential of recruitment in supine and who were receiving high PEEP. So there is a subgroup of patients in which atelectroma could be minimized by the prone, but it is not really sure that atelectroma is very important in the current time. We have no evidence, for instance, that PEEP is able to reduce the survival. There is, very well, probably the individual meta-analysis of Braille and coworker showing a statistically significant effect of using high PEEP in Hertz patients below 200 PF ratio. But this reduction, even though statistically significant, is not really clinically relevant. So the issue of atelectasis is certainly something important. It is very fascinating, but you know the impact is not that much as we would expect. What we have observed in the trial is we use in prone lower PEEP. You have in our trial, you see that we use a low level of PEEP actually, and we were able to decrease this level as compared to the supine position group, and the same was true. And the same was true also in the second Italian trial. Even though the PEEP was decreased in the supine group, you see that in the prone group, the level of PEEP was on average, you know, at 10 centimeters of water at day 5 and day 7. And you have, I just put to compare the survival curves. It is the Italian trial. There is a reduction, but it was not significant. Whilst in our study, there is a significant reduction in mortality. And therefore, you know, the issue of PEEP, can the issue of PEEP in prone position be improved by using a technique which is very popular, which gained in popularity, I will say, in the current time, which is the esophageal guided PEEP, coming from the concept developed by Stephen Loring and Daniel Chalmers. And the idea is very simple. You have here the PEEP set at 10 centimeters of water at the airway opening. Here you have an expiratory esophageal pressure, a reflect of pleural pressure of 18 centimeters of water. If you make the simple subtraction from PUSO from PAO, you get a negative value of transpulmonary pressure. And they said, well, you know, try to put the transpulmonary and expiratory pressure at least equal to 0. And by doing this, it could be that we are going to reopen some part of the lung. And in a patient like this, to really reach 0 expiratory transpulmonary pressure, you have to increase the PEEP up to 25 centimeters of water. And you know, they obtained they made a first trial in their unit, published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2008, showing a strong benefit in terms of physiology and a strong strength toward better survival in the esophageal guided PEEP. But this was not confirmed in the EPVAN2 trial that was published last week in the JAMA. There is no difference in survival. Actually, that was a composite endpoint. But you know, maybe one of the reasons for this negative trial, that was the PEEP was not different, you know, between the two groups, contrary to the first trial they did in their unit, where there is a marked difference between the PEEP, the esophageal pressure guided PEEP. You know, the PEEP was 7 centimeters higher than in the control group. So we were interested in this setting, you know, in this strategy, and we were and we made a study published last year in Annals of Intensive Care. It was a 2-center study. It is a study we did with Jordi Mancebo in Barcelona, Spain, over 38 ALS patients. And our hypothesis was that the inexploratory esophageal pressure, which is really the motor of the esophageal PEEP guided strategy, is lower in prone than in supine, because, you know, in prone, you have the compressive effect of the mediastinum, the heart, and the weight lung. So the inexploratory esophageal pressure is lower in prone, and therefore the transpulmonary pressure should be higher in prone, and therefore the PEEP should be lower in prone than in supine. It was our experiment, our hypothesis, and therefore in 38 ALS patients, we compare 2 PEEP strategy, PEEP and FiO2 table, and PUSO guided PEEP with the same objective of transpulmonary and expiratory pressure of 3 centimeters of water. We did that in supine 30 degrees and in prone 0 degrees, and we have an early assessment and also a late assessment. After this early assessment, the patients were randomized into 2 groups. A group who received the piezo guided PEEP for the rest of the session, and the other group who receives the PEEP and FiO2 table for the rest of the session. And what we observed actually, that on PEEP of 10, at the baseline, in supine and prone, the inexploratory esophageal pressure was similar. So our hypothesis was not confirmed. There is no change on average on inexploratory esophageal pressure in supine and prone at same PEEP of 10, meaning that we had already in supine position almost 1/4 of the patients with a negative inexploratory transpulmonary pressure, not a rate which was very much lower than found by the study by Chalmers and co-workers. However, as you can see here, this strategy allowed to titrate the level of PEEP in supine and prone. You have here the variation of PEEP with the esophageal pressure guided strategy in supine and here in prone. You see that you have here the number of patients. For instance, here in 14 patients in supine, the strategy here made us to increase the PEEP between 1 to 5 and to decrease the PEEP from 1 to -5 in 12 patients. And you see the same was true also in prone position, and that were not the same patients that were subjected to this change in PEEP from this strategy. But on average, you see that the change in oxygen, the change in PEEP from this strategy was 2 centimeters of water in supine and the same amount in prone. So it's not really, it could be that, with this strategy, you change dramatically the level of PEEP on average, but you see that you really titrate the PEEP according to some physiological basis in patients. And interestingly was the late effect. As I told you, we randomized the patient into 2 groups for the rest of the session, and we measure the patient at the end of the 16 hours in prone position, and we see that we had on average a continuous improvement in oxygenation. We had an improvement in PO2, a decrease in PCO2, an increase in inexploratory lung volume, but this was due to the prone per se, because there is no effect, there is no effect, statistically speaking, on the PEEP, and there is no interaction between time and PEEP. So this beneficial effect on inexploratory lung volume and gas exchange was really due to the time spent in prone position, and suggesting that over time, prone position continues to recruit the lung and to improve the alveolar ventilation. So I would like to conclude there. And to me, prone position has major physiological benefits and can improve survival in selected ARDS patients in the present time. And we have an effort to increase the use of prone in ARDS patients below 150 millimeter of mercury PF ratio. We can probably use prone position in patients less severe than 100 millimeter of mercury PF ratio. And my quite last slide is to share with you a recent recommendation of French expert about the management of mechanical ventilation in ARDS patients. So we start from every patient receiving invasive mechanical ventilation and sedation. And first, we have to set the tidal volume around 6 ml per kilogram predicted body weight at this early stage if there is no strong metabolic acidosis. And also you have to make every effort to rule out or to confirm ARDS criteria, because from the LungSafe study, we know that in 30% of the cases, we don't make the diagnosis of ARDS, whereas the patient has really an ARDS. And we here confirm, we remind you the ARDS criteria according to the Bowen definition. Then we confirm ARDS in this patient, so we continue with the low tidal volume. We monitor the plateau pressure and we make every effort to maintain below 30. We use a PEEP, we could recommend to use a PEEP greater than 5, not just equal to 5, and to monitor also PCO2. And with the increasing ARDS severity, if the PF ratio is less than 200, we have to try higher PEEP. And in particular, we haven't to use high PEEP if there is no oxygenation improvement. So we recommend to test higher level of PEEP, let's say greater than 12 centimeters of water. And by the way, we define here higher PEEP above 12 and not above 15 centimeters of water. We were looking at lower value of high PEEP. It's just recommendation from our society. It's not representative of what can be sought around the world. And if there is still a lack of improvement, and in particular, if the PF ratio is less than 150 millimeter of mercury, we recommend to use a neuromuscular blocking agent and prone positioning at this level. We discussed about prone positioning, and I showed you my arguments for that. Regarding the curarization, we have the trial by Laurent Papazian, the accuracy trial, but we know that now we have a trial done in the US, the ROSE trial, showing that there is no significant difference regarding the mortality by using neuromuscular blocking agent. So it could be that it is an open, still open issue. And if the PF ratio is less than 80 millimeter of mercury, you have to consider ECMO. If the refractory, if the hypoxemia is really low, or if the lung protection is not feasible. If you are not able to maintain plateau pressure below 30 centimeters of water, or if you have a respiratory acidosis, and at this stage, you have to contact an expert center to discuss the opportunity to perform VV ECMO in this patient. Possible treatment include inhaled nitric oxide and spontaneous breathing. But if you would like to offer to this patient a spontaneous breathing, you have to also make every effort to maintain the tidal volume in a safe range. There is no current recommendation possible for the ECOR. For the driving pressure, should you target really 15 centimeters of water driving pressure or less, we cannot recommend that. And spontaneous breathing at this early stage, we have no recommendation possible to do that. And probably not to do systematic recruitment maneuvers and not to use HFO ventilation. And also what was very important to us was to reassess the setting and the target at least every 24 hours and probably several times a day. I thank you for your attention, and I thank you again for attention and invitation.
Thank you to you. Thank you, Dr. Claude. Very, very exciting conference. Thank you very much. It was a very comprehensive explanation. Thank you so much. And let's move on to the questions if we have time. If you agree, Dr. Guerin, do we have time enough?
Yeah, I may have some time.
Thank you. I'll speak in Spanish. Gracias a todos, de verdad, estamos gratamente satisfechos y contentos por esta magistral conferencia y esta extraordinaria revisión sobre la posición prono y todo lo que esto implica de manos de un excelente experto mundial. Y pues vamos a pasar ahora a las preguntas. Si ustedes tienen alguna pregunta, algún comentario desde Facebook o aquí a través de la plataforma, pues vamos a comentárselas al doctor. De hecho, ya hay algunas preguntas. Antes quisiera yo también preguntarle al doctor algunas cuestiones, sobre todo de cómo predecir que un paciente va a responder a prono y si realmente esto es importante o no, porque hemos visto algunos artículos en los cuales pues realmente no pareciera ser tan importante el predecir si un paciente antes de pronarlo va a responder, pero me gustaría escuchar la opinión del doctor. Dr. Guerin, one question from me is, do you consider it's important to predict that one patient is going to respond to prone position before to prone? Because I think that this is a very, very common question, and some papers have said that this is not really relevant to predict if one patient is going to respond. Actually, there are some papers about lung ultrasonography in order to predict if the patients will respond to prone position. One paper, the first one from France, apparently it is possible to predict because some areas of the lung are maybe prone to respond. However, other articles we didn't or were not able to predict prone position response. What is your opinion about this, Dr. Claude Guerin, about this specific question, how to predict and if this is important from your point of view?
I think it's a very good question, but to me, there is no interest to predict, oxygenation response. Except in patients with very, very severe hypoxemia. And in this condition, you have to discuss, you have not to delay the possibility to move the patient to ECMO. But it is very rare patient. In the vast majority of the patients, you have relative severe hypoxemia, but in my opinion, there is, a desynchronization between the oxygenation improvement and the VILI prevention. The most important thing is to prevent ventilator-induced lung injury. And you can achieve this with a prone position irrespective of its effect on oxygenation. Our practice is to, not to look at the oxygenation response, except for detecting an impairment of oxygenation. In almost 10% of the patient, you have actually a worsening of oxygenation. And in this case, it is not logical to continue with the prone, but it's very rare. And, in our practice, we don't really care about that. And it is a study I did not mention. Rick Albert, reanalyzed the data of Prosiva and found no relationship between the amount of response of the first session in terms of oxygenation change and the survival. If you have no change, an improvement, and the extent to which the oxygenation is going better has no effect on mortality.
Exactly.
So, I don't know if I answer your question, but we don't really care.
Exactly.
I know that the young doctors are very, concerned by the lack of response. But I think that as soon as the patient is sedated, paralyzed, receiving invasive mechanical ventilation, your first goal is to protect the lung from VD, and this is not really related to oxygenation.
Exactly. Thank you, doctor. Thank you. No sé si tuvieras, Quetzal, algún comentario o preguntas antes de pasar a las preguntas del chat, que hay varias ya, Quetzal. ¿Me escuchas? Bueno.
¿Ahí me escuchas, Juan?
Sí, ahí sí te escuchamos, Quetzal.
Sí, tengo yo 3 preguntas para el Dr. Guerin. Thank you so much, Dr. Guerin, for the brilliant lecture. It's always a pleasure to have you here with the Mexican society and Latin American society talking about prone position ventilation. Thank you so much. I have 3 questions. The first one is that since the physiologic perspective of prone position, there are some authors that have published that there are 2 kinds of response. One called PO2 response and one called PCO2 response. So they say that if the patient responds or increase his PF ratio, probably the mechanism is because they increase the blood volume to the pulmonary capillaries. Meanwhile, if the patient increase decrease PCO2, it's probably because they are recruiting more alveolar units. Are you agree with this theory?
Yeah. It's very, I think it's very interesting. But again, you just make complex inferences on pathophysiological mechanisms just based on PO2 and PCO2. And if you look at PO2 and PCO2, you are looking really at a very few findings of the overall gas exchange concept. But
okay.
I do agree with you. Behind the effect on PO2 and PCO2 with prone, as with any manipulation of the line, you may have different mechanisms. I do totally agree with you.
And would you consider a different pathophysiology mechanism of the disease in the patients with PO2 response or PCO2 response? I mean, talking about, would you consider a different mechanism of pathophysiologic mechanism of the ARDS in those patients who decrease PCO2 and in those patients who increase PO2?
Regarding what? Regarding the use of prone or the use of PEEP?
Regarding the use of prone.
As I told you before, we don't really take care about the response.
Okay.
Because again, probably ventilator-induced lung injury is not totally related to gas exchange changes. What could be very nice is to have, a biomarker showing us you are triggering ventilator-induced lung injury or you are protecting the lung. There is some biomarker like SVG. I don't know if you know this biomarker, but it is a marker of the, improvement in the capability of the lung to remove the water. It's a marker of the epithelial clearance. It has been studied by Jean-Michel Constantin in Clermont-Ferrand, and there is a very nice systematic meta-analysis published in Intensive Care Medicine some weeks ago. So maybe a biomarker could be very interesting to say us we are inducing ventilator-induced lung injury. This is something that we need, I think.
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor. The second question is about what about the patient that doesn't respond to prone position ventilation? What are the theories behind the non-response to prone position?
To me, it's not a problem. Either it depends on the severity of hypoxemia. If the patient has a PF ratio of 50 millimeter of mercury and doesn't respond, you have rapidly to consider ECMO. If it is between 80 to 150 or 200, it is not really a hurry. You have to again protect the lung, make every effort to protect the lung from the risk of mechanical ventilation, and also you have, and this is something which is on the top of everything, you have to make the diagnosis first of ERDS and second of the cause of ERDS. Even so, it is apparently idiopathic ERDS. You have to make every effort to find out a systematic disease, an infection. You see what I mean? It is probably more important that the gas exchange per se, except if you are in a very severe hypoxemic condition. Here you have to make every effort to save the patient from death due to hypoxemia. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and the last question is, since clinical perspective, there is a patient that we usually call prone dependent, the patient that needs to be continuous prone, because if you supine him, they decrease PF ratio or probably get hypoxemic. Would you consider in those patients to give a continuous session of prone position more than 24 hours, probably 36 hours?
It's a very good question again. in our trial, for instance, I have in mind several patients who were prone during the 28 days of the study. There was no improvement. So in this case, again, you have to have the first concern you may have is to avoid ventilator-induced lung injury, to avoid severe hypoxemia, and to make the diagnosis that explain the reason why the patient is still hypoxemic. You have to look at the fluid balance. You have to track ventilator-associated pneumonia, pulmonary embolism, patent foramen ovale. Is the hypoxemia really due to loss of lung volume? Do the patient have a patent foramen ovale? This is very important to rule out. And you have also to see if there is a cause of ERDS. You have not able to make the diagnosis like a systemic disease, or you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And in some patients, I have in mind some patients in whom they were as you say, prone dependent. We rule out everything, and we decide one day to change totally of strategy. And frequently, this was observed in obese patients, and we change the strategy, we stop coagulation, we stop sedation, and we let the patient breathe spontaneously. And sometimes we have good results.
Okay, thanks so much. No sé, Juan, si quieres pasar las preguntas del
sí,
que hay bastantes.
Sí. Así es, y algunas se están contestando con las respuestas del doctor. Por ejemplo, el doctor Eder Zamarrón, al que le mandamos un afectuoso saludo, nos comenta si en cuanto a la relación PF ratio, recomienda volver a supino. ¿Con cuánto de PF ratio recomienda volver al paciente a supino? Dr. Guerin, one question from the audience is what is the threshold of PF ratio in your opinion to relieve or to stop the prone position?
So, in our trial, and it is really what we did and continue to do, once the patient had a PF ratio greater than 150 after 4 hours in supine, we define the winnability of the prone position. So, that was based, again, on oxygenation criterion, which is not the best one we may have. But, once the patients had no longer the entry criteria, we had to stop.
Okay.
This is like we do. And with a strategy like this, we concentrate the dose of prone position over, a relatively short period of time, but a very high dose. As I told you, during, let's say, 1 week, the patient was in prone for 75% of the time.
Okay, thank you, doctor. And another question from the audience is if this maneuver, the prone position, can be done in the emergency department. In your opinion, should we start the prone position from the emergency department in severe ARDS patients?
So I'm not familiar with emergency departments in whom the patient with ARDS can be managed. The healthcare organization system I'm used to use, is that a patient like this is rapidly in the ICU.
All right.
I will not do prone position in the emergency department, but I don't know what do you mean with emergency department. It could be that emergency department is really an ICU. To me, prone position should be done in a very specific setting, be done safely. You see what I mean? So
exactly.
In my mind, in my French view of what is an emergency department in France, I will not do that. I will not do prone position in such a department.
Exacto. Sí, efectivamente, las condiciones de las salas de emergencias y los conceptos son diferentes de un país europeo al nuestro. Seguramente las condiciones son diferentes. Probablemente en nuestras unidades de emergencias los pacientes permanecen más tiempo. Entonces, quizás ahí, si reúne los criterios y sobre todo si el personal está suficientemente capacitado, podría iniciarse. Desde luego, el doctor Guerin está hablando de un contexto diferente de acuerdo al que él se desempeña. Quetzal, no sé.
However, I'm thinking about another point I would like to add in my response. Sometimes, you know, we are called by other hospitals, let's say, which are far from our hospital by 100 kilometers. The patient is very severe, and they are not very familiar with the prone position. And what we have done in some patients, we are not in the emergency department per se, but you know, we transported the patient in prone from this hospital to our hospital.
Exactly. Okay, very, very interesting.
Pre-hospital, you know, you see what I mean?
Okay, exactly. Quetzal, no sé si quieras comentar más preguntas mientras checo en Facebook.
Sí, Doctor, I'm gonna combine two questions from the audience, from Dr. Jorge Cabrera and Dr. Miguel Ibarra. They're asking that if you consider to increase the time of prone position ventilation as a routine, because some of the physicians are struggling about supine again the patient, and probably the patient, I don't know, get hypoxemic or probably with hemodynamic instability once you supine again the patient. So some authors are suggesting to increase the period of prone position ventilation to 48 or 72 hours as a routine rather than 16 hours. Would you consider to do that?
We have been doing that, but based on the fact that once the patient went back to supine, he was very severely hypoxemic. So we moved immediately the patient back to prone. And sometimes, but we have no strategy of systematically providing with 3 continuous days.
Okay.
This may, you know, this may be something to investigate, but I wouldn't, you know, I don't know. I've no really an opinion about that.
Okay. Another question from the auditorium is from Dr. Uriel Rico. He's asking how many prone sessions do we use before consider ECMO in patients with severe ARDS?
It's a big question. You know, so since we have the results of EOLIA trial, the question is it's very difficult. What I know is that in our trial, we did not allow the crossovers. I mean, in the supine position group, the patients were not allowed to move to prone. And in our trial, overall, 45% of the patients had criteria for EOLIA, 45%. And only, I think I have in mind 7 patients went to ECMO. So after how many prone position sessions should we consider ECMO? If you ask this question to Alain Combe, he will say, you know, if there is no answer, if there is no response after 1 session, and the patient is below 100 millimeters of mercury, you have to go to ECMO. I will not be so much in that way, you know, and I will continue to prone, having in mind, you know, the possibility to not delay the ECMO. And I think the people who may better answer this response are those who are the équipoise between the prone and the ECMO. This is the case in our unit. We have the ECMO. So those people are better suited to, you know, I don't know if you have the ECMO in your unit, but I've no really the question. I will continue to offer ECMO, below 80 millimeter of mercury in supine. I will judge the PF ratio, in supine and not in prone.
Okay, thank you so much. Another question from the audience is from Dr. Luis Lopez. He's asking about if you believe it's possible to use prone position ventilation in patients with hypercapnic respiratory failure, those who are in non-invasive mechanical ventilation that doesn't respond, or even they are in complete mechanical ventilation that doesn't respond.
I don't know. There is no really dedicated study on those patients, so I don't know. It could be, in the first study we did, over 800 patients, there were patients with hypercapnia because we enrolled all comers hypoxemic patients. Some of them had concurrent hypercapnia because they were COPD patients, and there were no, signal in this subgroup of patients. But there is no dedicated study done in this kind of patient. The rationale, again, could be to prevent ventilator-induced lung injury just because of the mechanical ventilation in those patients. But there is no data, I think.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Ok, pues pareciera la última, Quetzal, creo que es del doctor Gerardo. Sí, que él es un reconocido pediatra que siempre nos acompaña. Y pues la pregunta es si el doctor Guerin tendrá alguna experiencia con pediátricos. Do you have some experience, Dr. Guerin, with pediatrics patients in your studies? What do you think about prone position in pediatrics?
Oh, so yes, we did. We published recently 2 papers in young patients with bronchiolitis, breathing spontaneously, and we found that there is a reduction in the work of breathing with a prone position at 2 levels of CPAP we used. So there is a positive impact, at least in work of breathing. There is no large scale. There is a large scale study done some years ago showing that there is no difference in mortality in children with acute hypoxemic respiratory failure. But the recent study we did in new patients with bronchiolitis showing a reduction in the work of breathing.
Okay, doctor. Thank you.
Una última pregunta, Juan.
Sí.
Doctor, I saw we're interested in the recommendations of the French Society. You no longer recommend the use of high-frequency oscillatory ventilation under any circumstance. But would you consider use another non-conventional modes of mechanical ventilation as APRV in patients in prone position who are not responding?
So EPRV, there is a trial that has been completed in France, over 700 patients, comparing a common way of delivering mechanical ventilation in ARDS patients versus APRV, which was delivered according to the threshold of minute ventilation and started after 24 hours of mechanical ventilation. And there is really no difference in survival. Exactly the same survival. The only positive effect of EPRV in this trial was to minimize the dose of sedation. This is something that was observed by Christian Puttensen many years ago in a small trial published in the Blue Journal in the year 2000 or something. But there is no argument of proposing early spontaneous breathing. And there is, you probably know all the literature, all the way of thinking in the current time about the risk of spontaneous breathing in those patients. We are very happy to offer spontaneous breathing to the patients, to put them in pressure support ventilation, and we may forget, that the lung is still injured, and there is still the risk of ventilator-induced lung injury. And therefore, this risk might be even higher than in the early phase, you know, where we are able to control the lung volume and so on. So this is a very, you know, delicate situation, the spontaneous breathing trial in some patients.
Yeah, we understand that it's not as safety as we think sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, doctor. And maybe the last and mandatory question is how to predict volume responsiveness in patients with prone position. What is your recommendation, Dr. Guerin?
Sorry, could you repeat your question?
Yes. How can we predict volume responsiveness in patients under prone position?
Volume response?
Exactly. In patients with under prone position.
Volume, what do you mean with volume?
The best method.
So fluid responsiveness, doctors, probably the...
blood responsiveness?
Yes.
What do you mean? You mean, how can we
predict?
You know, there is a frequency argument. Once the hemodynamic is stabilized in the supine position, there is no reason for the hemodynamic to become unstable by the prone position. Of course, if the patient has a septic shock, is under vasopressure, you put the patient in prone, the hemodynamic may be unstable due to the septic shock, but not due to the prone position. But in my personal experience, in the data published by others and also data we have recently published, once you have stabilized the hemodynamic situation in supine, which is probably the first goal we may have, you may be quite confident that the hemodynamic will not be deteriorated due to the prone per se. Never, but I've no argument to predict the effect of prone position on hemodynamics. At least there is no change. At the best, there is improvement, and the reduction is very rare. But it's possible. Huh? You can, yeah, it's possible, but very rare.
Yes, and maybe the right question, doctor, is what method to use in case of a patient is in prone position in order to predict volume responsiveness? Because exactly, there are some papers recommending a Trendelenburg as a passive leg raising, similar to passive leg raising.
It is a study we did.
Exactly.
It is a study we did, and actually what we found that was the Trendelenburg position was able to accurately predict the improvement in cardiac index, so the preload dependence in prone position.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Bueno, Quetzal, no sé si haya algún otro comentario para entonces ya cerrar el webinario. Hemos tenido una extensa participación. Hay muchísima gente que estuvo viendo y que asistió a este webinario, al cual les agradecemos infinitamente. Quetzal, no sé si tuvieras algún comentario para ya terminar con el webinario.
Pues no, Juan, veo ya no hay preguntas por acá por Facebook, ni tampoco aquí por Zoom. Y pues no otra cosa más que seguir las recomendaciones, ¿no? El SIRA severo o el SIRA con PAFIO 2 por debajo de 150, que fue realmente el criterio de inclusión en PROSEVA y que lo acaba de repetir el doctor Guerin, pues hay que considerar la pronación en esos pacientes, pronaciones por periodos prolongados. No es raro encontrarnos de repente en algunas terapias intensivas pronaciones por 1 hora, 2 horas, ¿no? De repente todavía hay cierto temor de algunos de los médicos en mantener al paciente en prono. Existen eventos adversos, pero la realidad es que también ahí están reportados y luego más en las series que han seguido después. Y la realidad es que son pocos los eventos adversos asociados a la pronación y mucho el beneficio que pueden tener los pacientes. Es un proceso relativamente sencillo y cuando nosotros revisamos por primera vez PROSEVA y estaban ahí esos videos publicados en francés y veía uno cómo eran tres enfermeras las que pronaban nada más al paciente, no había necesidad de otra cosa. De repente todos pensamos en que necesitábamos una rotopron y necesitábamos camas especiales, pero pues la realidad es que no. Eso es un proceso relativamente sencillo, hay que hacerlo con precaución y evidentemente el paciente tiene que estar vigilado. pero a todos los intensivistas y que tienen posibilidad de hacerlo, considérenlo. La realidad es que es un proceso que ayuda bastante a los pacientes, ¿no? Con las recomendaciones alrededor de la ventilación, pues que ya se han descrito.
Así es, así es. Bueno, pues con esto terminamos. Dr. Claude Guérin, thank you so much for your
Welcome.
talk. Thank
It was
you.
a pleasure.
Do you have some last words for our Mexican and Latin American audience?
No, that was a pleasure to be here. I hope you are in touch with our thoughts, and maybe we can collaborate in the future about proning or something else.
Of course.
Our pleasure. Thank you, Dr. And it will be a great pleasure for us, Latin American and Mexican people. We are willing to participate with all your effort. Thank you, Dr. And I'm going to finish this webinar. Really appreciate all your attention and spending part of your excellent time with us. Thank you so much, Dr.
Buenos días. Thank you so much.
Gracias a todos.
Doctor. Sí, ya.
Gracias, Quetzal. Nos vemos. Un
Gracias,
saludo
Juan.
a todos. Hasta luego. Muchas felicidades. Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.